In the quiet neighborhoods of early 1000, 960s Boston, where snow dusted the streets and church bells marked peaceful Sundays, fear began to slither behind locked doors. Women living alone started dying, strangled in their own homes, their bodies arranged with a disturbing sense of ritual. The newspapers whispered of a monster stalking the city, and soon every creak in the night carried terror. The killer didn't break in through shattered windows or force locks. He was invited in. A soft knock, a calm voice, and within moments, another life extinguished. The press would call him the Boston Strangler, but before the name was born, Boston was already drowning in dread. Housewives double-checked latches. Young women refused to stay alone, and the police stumbled in confusion. The city's trust in itself began to die before the first suspect was even named. The murders began with Anna Schleschers, a 55-year-old seamstress found lifeless in her apartment in June 1962. Her body was discovered posed grotesquely, her own stockings twisted around her neck like a cruel signature. Days later, another woman met the same fate. The pattern repeated. Different women, same strangulation, same haunting presentation. Panic spread faster than reason. Every woman in Boston became a potential target, every man a possible suspect. Police stations overflowed with false leads and frightened calls. Newspapers splashed headlines across front pages in bold black letters. Strangler strikes again. Yet behind the headlines lay a truth even more chilling. The murders appeared meticulously planned, but the killer left no fingerprints, no footprints, no witnesses. Boston became a city of whispers and deadlocks, where fear became the language everyone spoke. Detectives, desperate to find answers, flooded the streets with officers and interviewed hundreds of men. Still, no pattern seemed to connect the victims. They were of different ages, backgrounds, and neighborhoods. The only thread linking them was death itself, by strangulation, often using items from their own homes. Investigators coined the term signature, realizing the murderer left his mark not in words, but in arrangement. The killer seemed to revel in control, and the absence of forced entry suggested something far more unsettling. He was trusted. Women reported visits from men claiming to be maintenance workers, deliverymen, or handymen. Police suspected a charming sociopath, someone who could talk his way past any door. But for every new theory, another woman died, leaving detectives choking on failure. Boston's skyline no longer stood tall. It trembled under its own shadow. The crime scenes became morbid classrooms where police studied evil's handiwork, furniture overturned, undergarments neatly displayed, and the same eerie knot tied around each victim's throat. Detectives began to suspect the work of more than one killer. How could a single man move so freely, kill so differently, and vanish without trace? Forensic science was still primitive, fingerprints unreliable, DNA unheard of. The city's homicide division operated on intuition, sketches, and the growing terror that they were chasing a ghost. In press conferences, officials promised progress, but behind closed doors, frustration simmered. Witnesses described vague figures. A tall man, a polite voice, a work uniform. No one could agree. Every night, radios hummed the same refrain: "Lock your doors, trust no one." Fear turned Boston's alleys into graves of silence. As the body count grew, the killer's pattern evolved. Younger women, once spared, began to appear among the victims. It was as if the murderer fed on panic, adapting to outsmart the police. Journalists painted the city as held hostage by an unseen hand. Headlines screamed for action, yet no arrests came. The mayor urged calm, though even he slept with the lights on. The Strangler had become an urban legend in real time. Proof that evil didn't need to hide in darkness when fear itself did the work. In neighborhoods where children once played freely, windows now stayed barred. The scent of dread clung to the city like winter fog, and for many, hope began to feel like a forgotten luxury. Behind the scenes, investigators formed special task forces. Profiling experts consulted from across the nation. Psychiatrists described the killer as methodical, intelligent, possibly sexually motivated. Still, the evidence remained maddeningly inconsistent. Some victims were sexually assaulted, others were not. Some scenes seemed ritualistic, others impulsive. Detectives theorized multiple offenders mimicking each other, copycats, inspired by fear. Meanwhile, the Strangler's name echoed beyond Boston's borders. New England's women became prisoners of their own caution. Even the smallest sound outside a window sent hearts racing. Police cars patrolled endlessly, but their sirens offered no comfort. The Boston Strangler had turned a thriving city into a psychological war zone, where every unlocked door was an invitation to death. Amid this chaos lived Albert DeSalvo, a wiry, unassuming man with a salesman's charm and a handyman's skill set. Born into a troubled home, he carried scars from a violent childhood. DeSalvo blended easily among strangers, polite, forgettable, but restless. Beneath his calm smile brewed a hunger for control. Before anyone suspected him of murder, he had already been dubbed the Measuring Man, breaking into women's homes under the guise of offering modeling opportunities, taking their measurements, and escaping unpunished. Later, he became the Green Man, committing a series of assaults across Massachusetts. These crimes hinted at escalating violence, a predator testing boundaries. Yet despite numerous complaints, no one connected him to the murders that had paralyzed Boston. DeSalvo's danger was not in his appearance, but in his invisibility. While detectives combed through endless reports, DeSalvo continued his life as though untouched by the panic. He worked odd jobs, charmed neighbors, and remained a ghost within the crowd. In 1964, he was arrested for a string of unrelated robberies and sexual assaults. At first, police saw just another petty offender, until DeSalvo began to talk. His confessions poured out with chilling calm, describing the Boston Strangler's murders in precise, horrifying detail. He recounted names, addresses, even the positions of bodies, information never released to the public. Detectives listened in stunned silence as the meek man across the table painted vivid pictures of Boston's darkest nights. Could this soft-spoken laborer truly be the phantom that had haunted the city for years? DeSalvo's confession shook law enforcement to its core. For the first time, there was a face behind the fear, a man who claimed to have strangled 13 women, yet doubts surfaced almost immediately. He seemed too eager to confess, too rehearsed, and his stories occasionally contradicted known evidence. Some investigators wondered if he sought notoriety, or perhaps had been manipulated by others. Still, the public clung to relief. Newspapers declared the nightmare over. Headlines read, "Boston Strangler confesses." Boston began to breathe again, but not everyone believed. The puzzle didn't fit neatly. DeSalvo was never formally tried for the murders, only for his sexual assaults, leaving the Strangler's case legally unresolved. Truth, it seemed, remained just out of reach. Inside prison, DeSalvo became a reluctant celebrity. Fellow inmates whispered about his crimes. Psychiatrists analyzed him endlessly. Some found him intelligent, even articulate. Others saw a compulsive liar seeking attention. He recanted parts of his confession, then reaffirmed them days later. Journalists interviewed him, chasing clarity but finding only contradictions. Still, DeSalvo spoke of remorse, insisting he wanted to help prevent others from killing. Whether this was guilt or performance, no one could tell. The police, under pressure, closed ranks. For them, the confession was closure, however imperfect. The public wanted resolution, not ambiguity. Boston wanted its monster caged, even if doubt lingered like smoke over every word he spoke. Then came 1973. DeSalvo was found stabbed to death in his cell at Walpole State Prison, killed by another inmate. The man who had once claimed to be the Boston Strangler met a violent end, his secrets buried with him. Some believed it was retribution, others whispered he'd been silenced. No one ever confessed to the prison murder. With his death, the last fragile thread connecting the crimes to confession snapped. Families of the victims were left with uncertainty once more. Had the right man died, or was the true strangler still out there, unseen? Boston had moved on, but its ghost refused to fade. Every unanswered question became part of the city's scarred memory. Decades passed, and technology advanced beyond what 1,960 investigators could imagine. In 2013, using preserved evidence, forensic experts extracted DNA from one of the Strangler's victims, Mary Sullivan, the last known murderer. When compared to samples from DeSalvo's exhumed remains, the match was conclusive. At least one murder, it seemed, was truly his. But the DNA proof raised new questions rather than answering them. If DeSalvo killed Mary Sullivan, did he kill them all? Or had others used the chaos to commit copycat crimes? The Boston Strangler, long thought solved, once again became an unsolved riddle. Proof that even time cannot silence the shadows left by terror. The confirmation reignited public fascination. Documentaries, books, and films revisited the case, each offering a different theory. Some experts argued that DeSalvo might have confessed under suggestion or coercion. Others pointed to the chilling accuracy of his details as undeniable truth. For survivors and victims' families, closure remained elusive. Decades of fear had calcified into legend. Boston's young residents, born long after the killings, grew up hearing the story whispered like folklore. The Strangler had become both man and myth, a reminder that evil can wear the most ordinary face. Even today, the name Boston Strangler echoes like a curse, haunting those who remember the winter nights when every knock at the door could have been their last. Boston eventually healed, its skyline rising brighter, its neighborhoods reborn, yet the memories linger in its brick walls and narrow alleys. Each anniversary of the first murder rekindles old headlines, old fears. Tour guides speak of the case with reverence, historians with unease. For all its modern safety, the city remembers what it's capable of losing. The women who died were not just victims. They were daughters, mothers, and friends whose lives ended far too soon. Their stories serve as grim reminders of trust misplaced and innocence shattered. Justice came too late, too uncertain, but remembrance endures where truth faltered. The unanswered questions continue to haunt both investigators and historians. Could there have been multiple killers operating under the same guise? Did DeSalvo exaggerate his role to gain fame or leniency? Was he a pawn in a larger game of psychological manipulation? Every theory opens new possibilities but closes no doors. The Boston Strangler remains a study in fear, a case that forever blurred the line between confession and truth. Even with DNA evidence, doubt lingers like a cold wind off the Charles River. In crime history, few stories are as hauntingly incomplete, as if evil itself refused to sign its name. Time has not softened the horror. The victims' faces still stare from faded photographs, reminders that safety is often an illusion. Their city survived, but something fundamental was lost: the comfort of believing that one's home is a sanctuary. The Boston Strangler turned that belief into a nightmare that stretched far beyond his lifetime. Today, his story endures not because of his identity, but because of what it revealed, how fear spreads faster than justice, and how the human mind craves answers, even when none exist. The streets of Boston are quiet again, but in the silence one can almost hear the echo of footsteps that once carried death to every door.